We have officially reached the 1/4 mark of the Pacers season. Going to reflect on their first quarter of the season, what I think it means about where they're headed going forward. And then Sean Woodley from Locked On Raptors is going to join to talk Pacers, Raptors, some fun post-Thanksgiving action. Lots to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. If you can't tell by my mic, I'm still traveling. We'll have the normal mic starting again on Monday's shows. Today, the Pacers have reached 20 games. The quarter season mark seems crazy to think about. One of only 4 teams that have already played 20 games, the Lakers, the Pelicans, and I forget the other one being the other. So definitely playing the most games in the league, a rapid-fire schedule for the Pacers. I want to kind of look back at how they've played so far, what it kind of means for the rest of their season, as we had a landmark point in the season. And then Sean Woodley from Locked On Raptors is going to join me for the last 2 segments to preview Pacers-Raptors, since the Pacers and Raptors look kind of different than the first two games played by these two teams. Let's start with the quarter season mark, though. And I know there's a lot of talk about how where teams stand after 20 games is generally pretty reflective of how the standings look at the end of the season. And if you're a Pacers fan, that should scare you right there. 8-12, which is an okay record, 40% win percentage. They're still 13th in the East. Ironically, the West would be easier. They'd be 10th in the West at the same record. That's so unusual. Usually it's the other way around, but yeah, certainly not a good thing if you're a fan to see the Pacers at 8-12 and 13th in the East after 20 games. And yet, it doesn't even seem that crazy. I run through the schedule before every season and preview every game one at a time. You can see the back-to-backs. You can see the road trips. See what games are going to be difficult. I had the Pacers at 9 wins at this point, the Detroit game being the big flipper that killed me. So they're not that far off of what the expectation should have been, to me at least. I understand if you as a fan had different expectations than me, whatever. But it's not that the Pacers have been so far off of what's expected of them. They've just played a really hard schedule. Basically, every strength of schedule sort of thing pans the Pacers as having one of the harder schedules so far. They've played 12 road games. I believe that's tied for the Hornets, but that's tied for the most in the East. I'm close to the top of the West as well. In fact, I believe it would be the top in the West. Yeah, they've played the most road games in the league and the most games in the league, right? So they've had a ton of games and a ton of games not at home, which is a tough schedule. They've played a lot of good teams as well. Their strength of schedule, just going off of win percentage, regardless of destination, has been pretty tough. So caveats abound. I'm going to kind of say some optimistic stuff about an 8-12 team, and I know that's going to sound weird because they are 8-12. If you just say you're at the quarter season mark, technically halftime of the Raptors game is the quarter season mark, whatever. Multiply that by 4, they're going to win 36 or 38 games. Gross. That's an awful season, right? I understand that thought process. They've not looked awesome at a lot of times this season, but again, they've played a ton of games and a ton of games on the road, and they're only really one game away from where I kind of thought they would be right now. They have a big home stretch coming up. They're getting healthier. There are reasons to believe they'd be better. How have they actually played, though? Record is not always indicative of stuff. And this is where kind of the Pacers look way better than what's happened in the win-loss column this season, right? If you go to net rating, which is just points scored per 100 possessions minus opponent points scored per 100 possessions, the Pacers are 12th in the NBA. 12th in net rating. Looking like one of the best 12 teams in the league seems crazy. Plus 1.3 net rating. They're the only team with an average or better, or they're the only team with an above 0 net rating that doesn't have 10 wins, right? So they've had some certainly tough luck with close games where they have lost by 5 or less in half of their losses, and they've won by double digits 5 times as well, right? So their net rating suggests they're a way better team than an 8-12 team, right? Their offense currently 16th. Their defense is 13th, right? That's average on both ends. That suggests they're about an average team, yet they're 8-12. That's what losing close games will do. It's really killer for your win-loss, but not really killer for your net rating. And I tend to think those kind of things balance out over the course of the season. Now, here's the thing. When you're 8-12 and you lose a bunch of close games, that's a pattern. That's not bad luck, right? There has been something wrong with the Pacers' late game execution this season, and maybe that will persist all season. and their net rating will outpace how they play as a team. And then that's certainly possible that looking at net rating right now doesn't seem very smart. But they are above average on defense and getting there on offense. And they look like one of the, to me, looking at them, they look better than an 8-12 team. So as you assess them at this point of the season, that is one place to look, is that they are actually playing better than their record. And as they have this big, long home stretch coming up that just started with this Lakers game, although that was a travel game, really finally being at home for Thanksgiving and having a day off in your home city for the first time in forever for this team. I think from this Toronto game onward, we will see some improvement from this Pacers team again. I feel very strange being pretty optimistic about this team, but this season is the farthest off I felt from the fan base in terms of how I feel about the team versus how the fan base feels about the team. This team's actually playing pretty well. I like the way they execute. Their record just doesn't reflect it. Another thing about the quarter season mark that makes this team's first 20 games kind of hard to think about is you go to man games missed due to injury. There's a lot of sites that track that, but all of them put the Pacers in the top 5 to 7, whatever, of that calculation. They've lost over 50 games of dudes just missing games. TJ Warren obviously missed the whole season. Levert missed time. Brogdon missed time. Duarte missed time. You know, they've had guys in and out. Dude, Jeremy Lamb missed a game or two. They've had guys miss time because of these injuries, and it's been really killer for them getting a solid rotation, getting that field together. But they still have a pretty good record. I think I saw they were 4-1 or something when Levert, Brogdon, Duarte, and someone else I'm missing all play in the same game. It's very rare. The loss to the Lakers might mean it's 4-2 now. Right? When they're healthy, they've been playing better. So I think that they definitely stumbled out of the gate. Their first quarter of the season has not been pretty in the win-loss column, and yet they're getting better on offense. Their defense still looks good numerically. They have a nice, cushier stretch coming up. They got through the probably hardest part of their schedule. Still a few tough games coming up pretty soon. And I think when we do the half-season measurement of how do the Pacers look now that we are halfway through the season, so early January, mid-January, when that comes up, things will be looking more reflective of how this team is. Maybe they're a little bit above 500 at that point, but the numbers bear out that this team is better than their record. And if things don't start to look that way, then yes, they might have a problem at end of games, or maybe it's foolish to think that this team has improvement on the horizon, but I think they do. I really think the way they're playing and the way they're figuring out how to all play together suggests that a good stretch could be coming for this team. And I think in this quarter season portion, just looking from a player perspective, Duarte's been better than I thought. Brogdon's been very good. Sabonis has been very good. Turner has been at a career best level very often. TJ McConnell has, right? So outside of Levert, who's been kind of stinky, and Holiday, who can't make threes, most guys are playing at a level at a pretty high level. They just need either Levert to step up or one role player to really put his stamp on this team and before Warren comes back. And they could be, I think, a better team than their record suggests and a better team than the perception of them certainly is right now. And it's very lazy for me to say that I think this team's better than their record. That sounds so Pacers colored glasses-y, and I try not to do that. I try to use numbers and actual analysis and quotes from guys and players to actually give proper analysis, and I think I've provided enough numbers to say they've had a really tough situation schedule-wise and injury-wise, and yet they're still 12th in net rating, looking better recently, figuring out how to play together. They've figured out how to play with pace, how to play more freely, correctly. I think that we could see a big run from this team coming up soon that makes this first quarter season just look like something where they stumbled out of the gate as a new team with a new coach and a bunch of injuries. But again, reserve judgment. If we get to the 41 game mark and they have 16 wins, double what they had in the first quarter, then yeah, you have to certainly panic on this team and say, wow, things are not looking good. They need to shake it up. Right now, I'm still reserving judgment and saying this wasn't that bad of a first quarter. They were only, again, one win away. They lost by 1 twice. They lost in Detroit. They should have won that game. They lost by 3 to the Raptors. They lost by so many close games. You could go on and on. They are much closer to being a pretty good team than they are to actually being an 8-12 team to me. And I think we'll learn a lot about this team in the coming months. That is my post-Thanksgiving rant about the first quarter of the season, where I think this team is at, how good I think they can be going forward. And I hate to be the optimist guy because I hate not understanding the pulse of fans very well, but I'm having a lot of trouble with that this season, admittedly. But we'll see what happens, and I could just be late to the party in the coming month. Raptors tonight. Pacers have stunk it up against the Raptors this season. I think still their worst performance of the season was Pacers-Raptors in Toronto. The totality of the game, certainly the first half of that Charlotte game was their worst moment, but their worst game of the season in Toronto. They lose by 18. Sean Woodley from Locked On Raptors is going to join me for the last two segments to talk about the Raptors with Siakam now. How they've looked recently, they are not as good. They were on a 5-game win streak when the Pacers caught them originally. That is no longer the case. So perhaps the Pacers could fare better in this one. So he will join the show. But first, a quick note from our good friends over at BetOnline.ag because it is Thanksgiving time. We all know what that means. A lot of football, a lot of family time, and nothing goes better with football than turkey and betting. And BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before for your football needs. They remain your number one spot for all the sports action this Thanksgiving. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up, all one word, to get that 50% welcome bonus with your deposit. Not just football. They've got pro and college hoops, NHL action, which is underway, boxing, UFC, your favorite Vegas casino games. You need to take advantage of all the amazing offers they have available for the 2021 season. Bet online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, they're stuffed with deals this Thanksgiving. All right, time for some crossover time between Locked On Pacers and Locked On Raptors. Listeners of both shows, thank you for making either Locked On Raptors or Locked On Pacers your first listen today as we enter the foray of previewing this game. And it seems odd to do another crossover for Pacers Raptors because they've already played twice this season, the third time they'll be playing, but yet a lot of differences between these teams in just a month's time. I mean, the Raptors were rolling the first two times they played the Pacers. No Levert the first time the Pacers played the Raptors. Pascal Siakam is now back from injury, so still a very different group of teams heading into this game on Friday. And of course there, as you can see, I'm Tony East from Locked On Pacers if you're on the Raptors side. Sean Woodley is here from Locked On Raptors. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. We're recording here on Thanksgiving, which for me is just Thursday where I don't have to do any work because everybody I work with is off. It's great. I'm having a great time. It was lovely to see you just shoot over a message and say, hey, want to crank one of these out while people cook food for me? Or I guess is that what's going on? Like, are you just waiting for food to be served down your gullet?
I can smell the bread being baked downstairs. I've already eaten an
Ooh.
unhealthy amount of pumpkin bread. It is like the middle of the day. So it is a wonderful day to talk about the Toronto Raptors and Indiana Pacers.
Yeah,
So
can't
I
wait.
will start with the obvious question about the Raptors
Yeah.
because the first two times the Pacers and Raptors played, no Pascal Siakam. He is now back, and I think he's probably the most underrated player in the NBA, just given how very little he's talked about from being a second-team All-NBA guy, literally 2 seasons ago.
Mhm.
So how has he looked since he's returning? How has he kind of helped the Raptors be a better team? And has he looked like the Siakam that was that second-team All-NBA guy 2 years ago?
Yeah, he hasn't quite gotten to the All NBA level just yet, but he has been really good and he's been really efficient, which has been the most encouraging thing. You know, his efficiency really took a hit the couple seasons he was the number one guy after Kawhi Leonard left. And, you know, it was always sort of a question of how much of a burden can he carry? Is he a true number one? And I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's not like a true number one on a championship team, but that doesn't mean you go and cast him aside or think he is bad or anything like that, because he is quite good and he is easily the most dynamic offensive player the Raptors have. He's the guy who can get a defense shifted and discombobulated more than anybody else on the team. He's a good passer. He has a bit of a mid-range game that he continues to work on, some step backs that he's working in. He's been pretty solid. You know, there have been a couple of really stinky games in there. He had a 4-point game against the Jazz where he was like 2 of 14, looked really rough. His defense was not there either. And his defense is probably the thing that's still lagging the furthest behind. And that's kind of been the story of the Raptors since they last played the Pacers. You know, the defense has kind of fallen on hard times here. They have not really gelled all that well. They had a great second half on Wednesday against the Grizzlies where they, you know, I think held the Grizzlies to 42 points and they looked like themselves and sort of on a string and rotating. But, you know, Siakam's injection into the lineup has kind of just made things a little bit weirder for the team. You know, you have Scotty Barnes. You're just trying to figure out what the fit looks like there. The fit obviously works if you watch the Raptors and see how they kind of play off of one another, the way they can both pass and handle the ball. It's a really nice combination to have in your front court, but it's still a learning experience. And on defense, yeah, like Siakam, a little bit slow, getting blown by here and there. He's not like the shutdown defender that you expect. There are moments where he's very clearly their best team defender when they play their really aggressive defensive style where they're rotating and filling in for the rotator all the time. But, you know, it's still been hit and miss and it's not quite been a consistent product. But on offense, I mean, He's averaging like 18 a game. He's, again, at like a 58.2 true shooting percentage, which is really nice considering he's got a couple of stinkers in there. And he's had some really explosive games. And I think the most encouraging thing is that he's just bombing away from three right now. That was really the big sort of thing that dropped off for him last season. Basically the same numbers across the board. He just was missing the point production that would come from making his regular amount of threes. This season so far, he's taken 4 threes per 36 minutes. He's shooting 41% from three as well. So it's down a little bit from his peak volume, but I think it's kind of a perfect in between where he's not settling for threes and he's actually like using his downhill, quickness and ability and spin move and all that, and using the 3-pointer as like a bit of a sort of backup option as opposed to it being a thing that he really leaned on in the last couple seasons a lot of the time.
Yeah, his shooting percentages frightened me when I opened his page that he could come back from injury and already be that efficient from basically everywhere on the floor. Because the other thing about the COVID year last year with him is it felt like he had so many important shots that just like barely didn't go in. That kind of hurt his perception. But like he's really good, and now that he's shooting again, right? When he was All NBA, he was about a league average 3-point shooter on like 6 attempts per game or something like that. I literally had his basketball reference page up and closed it to make that point. But yeah, to see his 3-point shot return seems like it'd be so huge for this Raptors team. And for the Raptors specifically, obviously OG's been awesome, but he doesn't quite have the gravity that Pascal does. And for a team that, they have some vets, but is trying to work in young guys, get them space to play and grow, it seems like his infusion would be really helpful for this team, especially with his stats looking so good. And yet, I look at the Raptors' results since they played the Pacers a few weeks ago, and they're not so rosy. And you kind of already tipped it, but what's going on with their defense? Why have they kind of stumbled since that 5-game win streak in late October?
It's just the lack of chemistry, man. Like, it's really rough right now. They're down to 24th in the league in defensive efficiency, and it's just they're playing the same scheme they've played for the entirety of Nick Nurse's tenure for the most part, or at least since Kawhi Leonard left. They played a bit of a different, more sort of adaptable scheme when they had a bunch of defensive geniuses during the championship season, where it was like, what is our defense? It's whatever we want it to be, whatever Marc Gasol says it is. To be a little bit more sort of defined in the last couple of years. And you think back to that 2019-20 season, they were the number 2 defense in the league. They were the topic of many a think piece about, wow, they allow so many threes, but are they allowing the threes to the right people? How are they doing this? They contest so well. Other teams are seeing ghosts when they're putting up threes because of the closeouts of Siakam and OG and the rest. And it's just not come together so far this season. They don't really have I think you got to look at Scotty Barnes. As great as Scotty Barnes has been, and he continues to be a really delightful player to watch on offense, he looks like a chicken with his head cut off on defense sometimes. It's just a really complex scheme for a guy to learn coming out of college. And he is often kind of filling in the most important roles in the defense. He's usually the nominal center when the Raptors are rolling out their small ball starting 5, when they've been able to do that, when they've been fully healthy. And there's a lot of responsibility there. There's a reason Marc Gasol, was the guy who made that defense work. He's a genius, and he'd been doing it for, a decade and a half in the NBA. Scotty Barnes is 20 games into his career, and he's just not there with the rotations, doesn't quite know where to be. He's a little bit sort of wonky with his closeouts, a little bit lazy, doesn't quite bring the closeouts. Do you mean to tell me that
defending in the NBA is harder than defending in the ACC?
It's very hard. Yeah, as it turns out. It's he just is not quite there. And then one sort of rusty wheel in the Raptors defense causes everything to kind of fall apart. And then you work in the fact that, even when they've tried to play a bit more of a reserved scheme where they're switching and stuff like that, which should be their base defense once they kind of get everybody up to speed, you would think, because of all the good one-on-one defenders they have. They have not really had a lot of success because they've come up against a lot of teams recently with really good dynamic guards. The Blazers have the Powell, McCollum, Lillard trio. Donovan Mitchell, of course, even, kind of go on down the list. I'm curious to see how they handle like Malcolm Brogdon and Kerose Levert, for example, in this game. It's just been blow by after blow by. Scotty Barnes cannot hang on switches right now. He's just too slow laterally. He hasn't quite figured out the angles. He gets up on guys way too close and then just allows the avenue to blow by him. And that's all stuff that's going to come around. The nice thing is that the offense has been way better than expected. They're number 7 in the league at the time that we're talking right now, which is stunning to me. I figured it was going to be the exact inverse in terms of offense and defense. A bottom 10 offense, a top 10 defense. I felt pretty good about that. And it's been exactly the opposite of that. But I do think if there's something that can change and sort of improve for the better here, it is the defense. And I do think there's a chance if the offense can even sort of stay around league average, which is still ahead of where I thought it would be, with time and congealing and all of that good stuff marinating together, I think the defense can get back to where you kind of expect it to be, where it is forcing turnovers and, really driving their offense through their defense. It's just not really been the case lately.
I just went back to Assembly Hall, where the Indiana Hoosiers play, which is my lame transition into talking about my man OG Anunoby, um, who just destroys this Pacers team. And like I've talked about this with you several times, but just the way he's built and the skills he has gotten better at since he joined the league are exactly what the Pacers suck at guarding. And I mean,
Mhm.
LeBron is the best or one of the best players in the league right now, but like he's very much low key on the scale of that talent level. But LeBron just had 39 against the Pacers last night because he's this big bodied dude who can just push guys around and create the shots for himself and his teammates. And the Pacers have, Torrey Craig kind of helps, but don't really have the answers for that, right? They didn't even go
Right.
to Craig until the fourth quarter in Toronto. And that game's still to this day a worst Pacers performance of the season. So I know OG's hurt. It was weird because I remember Nick Nurse reading quotes that he said that OG might be out for a while, and then he was like questionable like 3 days later or something. What
Yeah,
what
I
do you
have
feel
no
like his
idea.
status is? Do you feel like he can play in this Pacers game? What's the deal with that?
I really don't know. I've given up trying to know what the Raptors are saying when they talk about injuries. Like, Nurse going to be like a while, and I don't know what a while means. It could be, 20 minutes. It could be 3 months. I have no clue. But yeah, the fact that
Well,
he's been
being vague
questionable
is great
now.
for your fans, so it's
Yeah,
such a good
it's
strategy.
wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good for betting purposes as well. But yeah, like right now, I mean, he's been questionable the last two games against the Warriors on Sunday and then against the Grizzlies on Wednesday. Maybe that like week of extra time, he's been out now for almost 10 days. Maybe that's enough. It's really hard to say. Also, hip pointers. I don't really know what a hip pointer is. I'm not a doctor, and I've never really had an explanation as to what it is. I'm assuming it just means you got hit on the hip real hard, but again, not a doctor. So I hope he plays, obviously, because I would just want to see the Raptors with their full complement of guys together for a single stretch of games. Like, it's really been stop and start. That's been a big problem with the defense and stuff too, is like there's just been no continuity whatsoever night to night. And I think, if OG's back and available, that makes their offense that much more potent. There will be a bit more of an adjustment period as they try to figure out, who gets the touches between OG, Gary Trent Jr., who's been on a heater lately, Fred VanVleet, Siakam, Scotty Barnes. Like, all these guys are dudes who can score and who, you kind of want to have the ball in their hands. So it might be a bit of an adjustment. And if OG returns, that might actually bode well for the Pacers, just because they're catching a team that's kind of in the midst of retransitioning back into their regular form. But yeah, if OG's available, I mean, he punks the Pacers quite often. He guards everybody on the Pacers, regardless of who it is. He's easily their best defender, all told. And he really unlocks the switching defense the Raptors would like to play and I think a little bit more regularity, but he just hasn't been around to do it. And that's been, again, a big reason why the defense has stumbled so badly here.
I think we should pivot to Pacers talk after you tell our listeners about our favorite product.
Yes, Built Bar is it's a wonderful time of year, and it's Black Friday, baby. When you're watching or listening to this, it is Black Friday, and Built is going all out to make this Black Friday weekend the most delicious Black Friday that ever was in the history of Black Fridays. New limited time flavors, new types of bars, and a winter wonderland of a deal. You want high-end deliciousness at a discount all through Black Friday weekend. Get at least 20% off anything and everything at Built.com using the promo code LOCKED20, LOCKED20. You've got a new flavor in Ruby Chocolate Puffs. Those are sitting in my fridge right now. I have not yet had them, but they sound delicious. You've got lemon dip cheesecake puffs, even more delicious sounding. The best flavor in the history of Built Bar to me is lemon almond cheesecake, which no longer exists, but a lemon flavored Built Bar in any form is going to be something for me. And a Built Black Friday weekend isn't complete without the word free. Buy any box of Built Bars through Sunday and get two of their brand new candy bars, Built Crave, for free. Built has finally done it. They've come up with a candy bar that is a great alternative to the bar that claims to satisfy. It's caramel flavored chocolate loaded with peanuts, giving that nutty, chocolatey, oh so good, sweet candy bar taste. Crave only has 160 calories, 17 grams of protein. Show me a candy bar that even comes close. You cannot. I defy you. No need to fight angry crowds. No camping for hours. Your best Black Friday deals are at Built.com. 'Tis the season to save and give your taste buds the gift of Built Bar. 20% off Built Bars and 2 free Crave bars at Built.com. Plus, you can get 60% off Built Broth and Built Boost and 40% off Built Swag. Just enter the promo code LOCK20 at Built.com on Black Friday weekend. All right, Tony, shall we talk about the Pacers. The Pacers are weird. They beat good teams. They lose to bad teams. They beat bad teams. They lose to good teams. I have no idea what the hell the Pacers are. They're a slightly positive point differential team, which was a surprise to me when I was looking it up today. Number 12 in net rating. Their offense is 16th. Their defense is 13th. They're the Pacers. They're the most average that they're ever averaged. I'm curious, Tony, are we any closer to figuring out what the hell the Pacers are since last we spoke and last the Raptors and Pacers played one another a few weeks back? Kerose Levert's back. He only played his first game in that second game between the Raptors and Pacers earlier on. So that probably doesn't really even count as like a Kerose Levert game. It was all new and fresh. What's the deal with the Pacers? Is there any sort of direction that's been established? Is it still like a let's see and wait for TJ Warren type of situation? They're a very, very baffling team.
Well said. They have 8 wins. They're 8-11, 8-12. I should know that better. And over half their wins are by double figures, and they've lost close an astronomical number of times this season, right? So their net rating is actually pretty reflective of who they are. Like they've just been so unlucky in these close games, and unlucky is the wrong word. When you lose a bunch of close games, there's something to it, right? But I think
Steve,
generally
2021 Raptors for that one.
Yeah, everybody understands what I mean when I say unlucky in that sort of context. But they're good for sure. Like they beat Miami, they beat Utah, they beat Philly, they beat Chicago. Great, those look good. But then they get stomped by the Raptors. No offense to the Raptors, they got stomped by the Raptors. Like they didn't lose to the Raptors, they got smoked. They lost to Detroit, right? They lost to the Nuggets without Jokic, Murray, and Porter, right? They have some just like kind of performances too. So have we gotten any closer to figuring out what the Pacers are? To answer that question straight away, no, we have not. Like there are weeks when TJ McConnell looks like the best player on the team, and then Miles Turner looks like the best player on the team, and then those guys go completely ghost the next week. So it's very hard to get a feel for this team. Basically, outside of Brogdon and Sabonis, no one has been consistently at the level you would expect them to be as a fan and viewer of this team all season. So it's very hard to get a feel for what they are. And yes, they're definitely in the holding pattern with TJ Warren. I think that will help answer a lot of questions about what this team can be. If he comes back, and it's going to be tough with the trade deadline timing to really assess what they are and figure out what this team can be long term of how much answers he provides, because they're just so inconsistent right now, and inconsistency is the hallmark of a not very good team. So it's really hard to get a feel for them. But the other thing you addressed that's very important is Kerose Levert, and he's been battling back pain all season. He missed the first so many games before that Raptors game.
I also have been battling back pain.
Me too. Actually, yeah.
Isn't sitting good for your spine? It's fantastic. I love being inside all the time.
He's playing kind of upright, like noticeably standing straighter up, which is strange. He's still he's had some better performances of late, I would say. Like his last 2 or 3 games, he's been a little better. But like 6 and 5 points in their 2 wins against Charlotte and New Orleans. Not what you expect from Kerose Levert. So the pain is certainly hurting him. He is shooting super poorly from the field this season. A ton of games shooting under 40% on decent volume. So he's been bad for a reason, but it doesn't matter what the reason is. You're trying to win. He's been bad. So pain is the reason. Levert is not the Kerose Levert. He still draws the attention of a defense enough to be somewhat effective. But yeah, he's been rough, and it has not been helpful for the Pacers that he has been rough.
So let me ask you, Tony, like they're still figuring out what they are. What do you think like the dream vision of this team is like for Rick Carlisle? Is there one in mind that they're trying to work towards? Is it like not going to be sort of clear until maybe they move out some pieces and change up the mix? Like I feel like we've been talking about the Pacers trading dudes for like half a decade now, and it's maybe
started
been
doing the
overblown.
show, basically.
Yeah, it's maybe been an overblown sort of like through line narrative type thing with the Pacers, but like in terms of finding that like dream Rick Carlisle Pacers identity, what is the pathway to that, and what exactly do you think that is, if there is any inkling to be had?
Yeah, I've got one lazy point and then a second less lazy but still effective point here. The lazy point is 2 years ago, basically this exact team, I say this so much, probably to you even, was pretty good. They were 4th in the East, and now they've added Torrey Craig in place of Doug McDermott, basically into that exact rotation. And Carlisle and Nate McMillan, probably pretty similar coaches, but different coaches. So I think the vision holistically is, if we're healthy, we know we can be a top 6-ish defense. Carlisle really emphasized defense, and Miles Turner's better than he was back then. Warren's been a good defender. So the hope is that when they get the healthy team, Carlisle can make them close to that good, and then he, with his different coaching style than Nate McMillan, can figure out what sort of tweaks and changes he would want because they had Oladipo that year, not Levert. It's a little different, but it's a close enough facsimile that I have talked about that very often. The less lazy part is I don't know how Carlisle feels about these guys yet. He's only coached them
Right.
for 20 games, right? But we can get a feel for what kind of guys he emphasizes more than others. And Levert's been bad playing under him, and he plays Torrey Craig over O'Shea Brissett and stuff. Like, we understand that he values certain traits.
Anti-Canadian rhetoric right there. I don't care for it.
I pushed very hard for O'Shea Brissett minutes on Locked On Pacers earlier this season. But Torrey Craig's been better than him, so it makes sense to me. But I
Right.
think that we don't, Carlisle's stamp on the Pacers might be tweaked pretty soon. Like, if they're under 500 at this trade deadline, I think that he'll push for. We see him be pretty interchangeable roles, perimeter play, guard heavy kind of guy. Maybe making a move, like they play two bigs and they're both good. Carlisle likes both of them, but it's not how he has historically favored playing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And even when he had Dirk, who was amazing, he did not park his butt near the basket, even in the two post player era. So I think that ideally for him, he'd have a little more shooting on this team. They do not have any really threatening shooters and a little bit more perimeter ball handling. So when his vision comes more into play, I think we'll know more about the Pacers. But I sincerely doubt the current roster construction is Carlisle's like dream roster, even though it has some talented players that fit the way he likes to play. And they know they can be better than this from 2 seasons ago. But the other question that has to be answered in all this is like, they were a 50 whatever win team that year. Is TJ Warren that important to everything you're trying to do? Like, when you think of TJ Warren, yeah, he's good, but it's like he shouldn't be that important. So they still have a lot of questions to answer, and his return will certainly help answer a lot of them.
Yeah, so turning our attention to the game tonight, Tony, is there a particular battleground, a particular matchup, a particular sort of stat department that you kind of have your eye on as something that you're pretty intrigued by as maybe like a pivot point for this game and the result?
That they stunk defending the Raptors pretty badly in the 118-point game. So just how do they kind of clean up defending, especially the Raptors second, like the Banton lineups. I remember I DM'd you and was like, who is this guy? Because he tore them up so much. And I think everybody's been asking you, who is this guy this season? But just the Pacers defense in general has not been up to the snuff. They're at 13th now, but I think they need to defend a little better against this team. So just matchup wise, who do they put on Siakam? And in general, how do they defend his gravity to make the Raptors not score as much? Because when the Raptors scored 118, the Pacers had no chance. And when the Raptors scored 97, the Pacers had a chance to tie it at the end of the game. They had a shot to it. So I think very lazily again. Man, I am just killing the lazy analysis.
It's Thanksgiving. You're supposed to be lazing around. You're off today. It's fine.
That is true. But can the Pacers find a way to get the stops required? I think when they made the adjustment from the first game to the second game of more Torrey Craig, that definitely helped. OG was not as good in the second game and stuff like that. But, can they, now Pascal is back and they're still very good. Maybe OG and Pascal are back. We still don't even know that kind of stuff yet. So how can they defend well against this Raptors team that has given them absolute fits for years and years and years? And two, can they find a way to get Jeremy Lamb in the game, because he is substantially better against the Raptors than any other franchise for some reason in his whole career. But all jokes aside, I think that they need to find a way to, Fred has played well against them this season. Like, can they slow him down? Their point of attack defense was way weaker in October than it is now. So can they, kind of apply some of the principles they've learned and evolved in this game, make him a little more uncomfortable, and in turn make, shots harder, make pick and roll situations harder. So I think it's going to be on defense and guys like Miles Turner, especially, who are their better defenders, to step up and really put their stamp on this Raptors team that, like you said, is surprisingly good at offense in ways that they weren't in past seasons.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm really curious about how the Raptors are going to go about defending Domantas Sabonis in particular. And it's a very different team than what they've played recently. They've played a lot of teams with sort of heliocentric guards. They took on the Grizzlies on this road trip, the Warriors. They played the Jazz and Donovan Mitchell, even like De'Aaron Fox. I would kind of classify as like a lesser version of those guys. And then dating even back to the Blazers, yeah, that's true. Dating back even to the Blazers, at the beginning of this interminable road trip they've been on, they have played a lot of sort of similarly styled teams. And now they come back to the Eastern Conference where everybody is grime. And I'm excited to see how they deploy their defense, because, I think really effectively in that first Pacers game just bothered the hell out of Sabonis and sort of made his life miserable, sent two to him every single opportunity. And the lack of shooting that you're talking about kind of plays into that. But it does seem like Sabonis is less of a hub for the Pacers this season. His assists are way down. Like, he's not like the central force that ties everything together anymore. Because you got a lot of guards with the ball in their hands. So I'm kind of curious to see how they balance that now with Levert, maybe a little bit more settled, even if he is playing through back pain. There's a lot of different ways they could go about it. And I'm curious, like, do they play a more sort of switch heavy reserve scheme, especially if OG is back, and just trust that any one of their guys can guard any one of the Pacers guys? Or do they continue to do the crazy throw two at the ball whenever a guy who has some threatening quality is kind of lurking around? And do they sort of force the kicks and sort of maybe expose the lack of shooting that the Pacers might have? It's a fascinating matchup, Tony. We, of course, will be watching it tomorrow and digging all into it. Do you have any parting shots here before we round this thing out?
No, you nailed it. Toronto's been the best at defending Sabonis in the league, and that's going to be key if they can keep that up. I mean, they've even put more of an emphasis on him being a hub recently, so if they can slow that down, I think Toronto's got a good shot. And the Pacers, if they fall to 8-13 and are 0-3 against the Raptors, that is the difference between under 500 and over 500 for them, is just struggling against under 500 Toronto Raptors team. So everybody listening on my feed, please go listen to Locked On Raptors. Sean, you got anything else?
No, man. Go listen to Locked On Pacers, to my Raptors fan brethren out there. And of course, thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Go and make your second listen of the day, Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd, very good at his job. He's going to win you some money in your fantasy leagues and make it so you don't want to rip your hair out at the very concept of fantasy sports like I do. That's all I got, man.
Sean's on Twitter at Woodley Sean for all his Raptors musings. And of course, I'm on Twitter at TEastNBA. American listeners, hope you had a great holiday. Canadian listeners, hope you had a wonderful Thursday. Enjoy the game tonight, everybody. And we will see you soon.